Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the 9th of August meeting of the local review body for East Renfrewshire Council. As clerk, I'm just going to move directly to the appointment of the chair. And do we have any nominations from those in the room as to the appointment
Nominate
of the chair?
Councillor Morrison.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edlin has seconded. Is anyone else otherwise minded? No. Therefore, unanimously, Councillor Morrison, if I could ask you to take the chair, please.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Councillor Morrison. I'm chairing this meeting of the local review body in the absence of the chair and the interim chair, the deputy chair. I'd like to introduce elected members present. So myself, Councillor Andrew Morrison, we have Provost Montague, Councillor Paul Edlin, and joining us remotely we have Councillor Chris Lundy. Item number 3, we have the officers present. So we have John Burke, who is the clerk of the local review body, Mark Brand, who is the independent planning advisor to the local review body, who obviously accompanied us to the site visits we attended earlier today. Mr. Brand has no previous involvement in the processing of any of the applications which we are reviewing today. We're joined by Jerry Mann, who is the council's legal advisor and is responsible for preparing the local review body's decision notices and to provide us with advice as necessary. So, the next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. So we also have apologies from Councillors Cunningham and McLean as chair and deputy chair, and Councillor Island. Any further to add?
Nothing further, Chair.
Okay, that's super, thank you. Next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. So as a reminder, the Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any financial or non-financial interest in items they have on the agenda. Are there any such declarations to be made? Okay, that's no declarations. Okay, moving on. Main substance of today's meeting is to consider 3 cases. The first such case is review 2023/05 for the erection of a new pitch roof over an existing flat roofed extension and the formation of a flat gable to the rear elevation and new dormer windows to the gable elevations. That's at 35 Sundale Avenue. That was the first site visit. Can I ask members, do we have sufficient information to make a decision today?
Yes.
Okay, that's agreed. Super. I would now like to invite Mr. Mark Brand as the independent plan officer to speak to this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first case this afternoon is the erection of a dwelling house and associated works. Apologies. It is the erection of a new upper floor extension and flat roofed extension incorporating a rear gable and new dormers at front and side. The proposal is in Ward 4, Clarkston, Neverley and Williamwood. There were no objections or representations in this case. I'll now summarise the decision by the planning case officer who assessed the application. The planning officer stated while there are examples of rear gable extensions in the area, these examples are to the rear of houses where views are contained, thereby reducing the visual impact on the character of the building. Likewise, there are nearby examples of large dormer windows, but these again are located in buildings with properties to either side, which reduces visual impact. The location of this proposal at the junction of two streets is prominent and does not benefit from screening by neighbouring houses. The proposed side dormers are large and in conjunction with the proposed 10-metre ridgeline would have the cumulative impact of significantly increasing the scale, size and massing of the building. Such a proposal in a prominent location would be detrimental to both the character of the building and the surrounding area. The reason for refusal given was that the proposal was contrary to policy NPF4, that's National Planning Framework 4, policy 16, and LDP 2 policies D1 and D1.1. I'll now summarise the applicant's statement in support of their appeal, which is that the existing flat roof on the extension is out of place and the new pitched roof will improve the visual appearance of the building. The flat gable is proposed to maximise space. The applicant points out there are similar extensions with flat gables at 16 properties in the neighbouring streets of Highfield Road, Knoll Park Drive, Sundale Avenue and Beachlands Drive. In addition, there are 8 properties in the wider area which have recently received planning consent for similar style extensions. Conditions. In the event of this review being upheld, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. 1. The development hereby approved must be begun no later than the expiration of 3 years beginning with the date on which permission was granted, or, as in this case may be, deemed to be granted. And the reason for that is to comply with provisions of Section 58 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 as amended. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's super. Thank you, Mark. Now, turning to elected members for consideration on this appeal, who would like to kick us off with their thoughts? Anyway, so obviously we've been at the site visit today. Obviously had some discussion at that point in time. Do we have any questions for the officer? Any points people would like to discuss? Provost Montague?
Yes, thank you. I noticed that, or it was said in the report and verbally, that there are other examples, but of this type of extension, but they're to the rear of properties in that locality. And also, I note just towards the end of the report that we have, the discussions had taken place with the agent over potential alterations that might reduce the associated impacts to a more compliant level, but no revisions were submitted. So it seems that the applicants might have been able to adjust to a more compliant or a more satisfactory proposal, but they haven't chose to take up that option at all. So I am not really of a mind to do otherwise than to uphold the officer's decision on this.
Okay, thank you, Provost. Any other members wish to contribute to the debate? I have Councillor Edlin.
Well, can I just clarify, we're talking about 35 Sundale Avenue?
That's correct, yes, the first case.
My view is that I thought looking around the area, I didn't think that the proposal was out of character with the rest of the other buildings in the area. There were variations, but I didn't think it was out of character. And looking at the other buildings, there were several others that were very similar, and I was surprised that this proposal had not been approved by the member of staff who was looking at it. And I would say I would be in favour of this proposal going through.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edlin. Councillor Lundy, appreciate your thoughts. Are any questions, please?
Yeah, I'm minded to agree with the Provost on this one, because I just feel like when we're talking about the size and scale of it, it would be out of character. I know that there are a couple of properties with similar extensions there, but as the Provost mentioned, they're to the rear of the property and they're not as visually obvious from the street because of this property's site, where it is very visible from the junction. So
okay, no, I appreciate that. And I mean, in terms of one kind of considerations for the purpose of the discussion, you know, it's obviously it's on the corner. That appears to be the main variable between this property and the other 6-7 examples which are set out in the papers with similar types of extension to the rear of the property. So it does have that greater visibility. But on the site visit, you know, as you look away from the property, across the junction there is another property which was quite substantially extended to the point where one would wonder where the original property actually began and ended and where the extension began and ended. So, I mean, in terms of the context of that being within the streetscape, does that change elected members' considerations at all, or how they view this particular application? Yes, Provost.
Well, we did take that. That was pointed out to us by one of the members, probably yourself, but it was obvious that the side on to the road and the prominent part of it was existing building. It wasn't an extension. And one of the problems with this is its prominent position in it. So that what you have said doesn't change that. It's in a prominent position and its size, scale, and if it had been to the rear, as the report says, I think it'd been a different matter. But we can only deal with what we have in front of us. So I'll stick to my original position. Thanks.
Okay, I appreciate that for the comment. Councillor Edlund.
I think part of the problem is it's actually, you say the rear, the front of the property is a corner site, and the property was at the rear of the property, but because it's in a corner site, it's facing the roadway of the other site of the corner building. It's in the corner, so it's seen from the other road as you go around the corner, and that's perhaps the reason. But my view is that there's so many variations of dormers and extensions in that area that I don't think it's significant.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Lundy, thank you for waiting.
Yeah, I suppose following on from that point that Councillor Edlin has made and Provost Montague, you know, planning legislation and the guides at which we're making this decision on have changed over the years, and I think in order for us to change the way that we're doing things, we can't just continue to agree with everything because in the past they've put dormers in a certain way or they've extended properties in a certain way in a certain area, because otherwise we're going to end up with the whole area looking like that. So that's my thoughts.
No, that's a salient observation. Thank you, Councillor Lundy. Mr. Brand, one of the other potential outcomes is to vary a determination. I suppose the question would be, and this kind of picks up the point the Provost made earlier, that the applicant was invited to make alternative proposals which would help achieve all or most of what we're hoping to do in their application. Is that an option which would be available today? And presumably it's not for the body to put forward an alternative proposal for the applicant, but it could be left open for the applicant to make another proposal, yeah?
Thanks, Chair. There would be nothing to stop the applicant coming back with a new proposal in the future, just because a planning application is refused. Anybody is entitled to submit a new application down the line.
Okay, understood. So on that basis, I'd like to ask members if there's anything further they'd like to contribute which hasn't been stated already. No, okay. Are we happy to move to a decision then? Do I have somebody going to move a proposal?
Yes, I propose, I move that we uphold the planning officer's recommendation to refuse.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Edlin?
Move to approve this application.
Okay, to reverse the officer's decision. Okay. Councillor Lundy, which of those will you be seconding?
I'm happy to second Provost Montague's proposal.
Okay. I must admit, I was actually minded to reverse as well, from what I've seen on the site today. Also, the property is on a corner location, which makes the rear isn't really secluded compared to the others, but you know, it is actually in keeping with a lot of the similar designs which are there, and one could argue, you know, it's more aesthetically pleasing than the current flat roof structure at the rear. Obviously, I didn't want to, you know, influence the debate as chair. I wanted everyone to have their say first. So, on that basis, I'd be seconding Councillor Edlin's proposal, and I'd appreciate that gives a tie. John.
Yeah, Chair. So in effect, we have two motions before the local review body. Provost Montague's motion to uphold, seconded by Councillor Lundy, and Councillor Edlin's proposal to reverse the decision, seconded by yourself. I imagine it's a foregone conclusion. I'm going to have a 2-2 tie. I don't imagine anyone's going to be changing their mind. Happy to proceed on that basis. It would be for the chair to make the final determination.
Invoke a casting vote. In which case, I think taking into consideration the fact there were no public representations against this either, I would be minded to use the casting vote for the reverse decision.
Further conditions or anything?
Okay, thank you, Clerk. So further to the decision of the local review body to reverse the original decision of the planning officers, I can invite Mr. Brand to suggest if there should be any recommended variations to the application. Thank you.
No further conditions, Chair.
Okay, that's super. Thank you. And Clerk.
So the decision of the local review body then is to reverse the appointed officer's decision and grant planning permission based on the conditions laid out in the report.
Okay, that's super. Thank you. Okay, the next case, the second case for today, is review 2023/06, which is for a new dormer proposed to the southeast elevation of an existing dwelling at 25 Polebury Crescent in Eaglesham. Can I ask members if we have sufficient information to make a decision on this today? Agreed, we do. In which case, I'd like to invite Mark Brand to set out this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is for full plan permission for the installation of a side dormer window at 25 Pole Bay Crescent, Eaglesham. This is in Ward 5, Newtonmere South and Eaglesham. There were no objections or representations. I will now summarise the decision by the planning case officer. In terms of the design of the proposed dormer, this would not detract from the character of the building or the character of the surrounding area, nor would the dormer lead to overshadowing or loss of daylight. The issue lies in that the dormer would be 2.5 metres from the boundary with number 23, the adjoining property. The front garden at number 23 has a high level of privacy created by the setback location from the road and maturity of the planting. The dormer would overlook the garden at close quarters. The reasons, therefore, for refusal are that the proposal is contrary to Policy 16 of the National Planning Framework 4 and Policy D 1.1 of the Local Development Plan 2, because the dormer would significantly overlook the neighbouring property. I'll now summarise the applicant's reasons for the appeal. These are: the dormer sits 10 metres from the side of the house at number 23 and is located at an angle to that house. The dormer would overlook the garage, driveway and vegetated area of the garden at 23 and not a used amenity space. The elevation should also be considered. The house at number 23 sits considerably higher than the house at 25. The house at 23 has dormers on all four sides, one of which overlooks the rear gardens of the property at number 25. And finally, the proposed design of the dormer is considered satisfactory in terms of materials and form. If, in the event of the review being upheld, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. The development hereby approved must be begun not later than the expiration of 3 years beginning with the date on which permission is granted, or, as in the case may be, deemed to be granted. The reason: to comply with the provisions of Section 58 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 as amended. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I'd like to open this to debate from elected members now. If anyone would like to kick us off, and Councillor Lundy online has caught my attention first. Chris.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on the reasons for the appellants sort of appealing the decision, and I think although they're saying that it would only oversee the garden because of the angle, I think obviously the planning officer would have taken that into consideration, and the overseeing aspect is one of the reasons that has been refused, because of the height that it's sitting at. It might not oversee or see into the adjacent property, but it certainly would see into their garden space, and I think that's obviously one of the reasons for the planning officer's decision, and I think we should bear that when making our decision.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Councillor. To elected members in the chamber, would anyone like to contribute? Councillor Edlin, do you have anything you'd like to say at this stage?
Well, I disagree with Councillor Lundy. The view from such a dormer, if constructed, would mostly be of the garage or building that we saw, the flat roof, the corrugated metal roof, that took up most of the garden, and it's overlooked by that. If you look at the other houses nearby, I notice they all have dormers and they all look into adjacent gardens one way or the other. I don't think people sit in their dormer windows looking at other people's garden, hoping to see something exciting. I think it overlooks a very banal view of a part of a garden. Admittedly, it might be higher than other houses, but I don't think it's relevant. And it's not out of character with other dormer windows in the area. So I really cannot see any objection to it. I'm actually quite surprised that it, on the basis of the declination of the proposal, that the official chose to decline it, but that's, I suppose, irrelevant to this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Provost Montague.
Yes, thank you very much. We're not here to make decisions on the value of views from particular windows, and also it's not I would argue that it's not the officer choosing to decline this, but it's the officer working within the parameters provided in the policies which are cited in the report. Things have moved on from the way they were in the past. Councillor Lundy made a very salient point in the last item that we were considering as well. Just because something has been done in the past under, one could argue, lesser standards, does not mean to say that anything from that has to conform to those lesser standards either. So the document says it would be the dormer would be positioned only 2.5 metres from the side boundary with the front garden number 23. Goes on to say that it would have significant impact on the privacy of the adjacent residents. So it's not for the adjacent residents to only occupy a particular part of the garden, or for us to guess that that's what they would do. The policy says, or the report says, that it would have significant impact on the privacy. And it's that aspect of privacy that is deemed that the nearby residents are entitled to. So I would support Councillor Lundy's comments to uphold the planning officer's decision and refuse.
Okay, that's super. Thank you, Provost. I'd like to ask Mark, I'm looking at policy D 1.1 at present, and there's 6 paragraphs there within the LDP2 around, for example, the loss of character or amenity to the surrounding area, the scale and character of the existing building, and so on. There isn't actually a thing in there specifically about overlooking another property and which aspects of the property cannot be overlooked, or indeed by which type of room it can be overlooked, because a bedroom would see less usage than, say, a living room or a day room. I just wonder if you had any views on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If you refer to policy D1, I think it's clause 16, there is a reference to amenity of residents, occupants and users of neighbouring, existing and new buildings and spaces should not be adversely affected by unreasonably restricting their sunlight or privacy. So there is a reference to privacy in an adjacent policy. Privacy is also mentioned in the, direct looking is referred to in the planning guidance, the householder design guidance, which was adopted with LDP2. So there is a direct reference in that document to avoiding a direct overlooking. If that helps clarify the policy situation, Chair.
It does. Thank you. It was actually policy D 1.1 I was looking at, so policy D1 is indeed the correct place to look at. I suppose it comes down to a matter of interpretation by elected members as to whether a front garden is a private place. You know, because it's obviously visible from the streetscape, as compared to, say, the rear garden of a property, one would expect more privacy. And I would simply note that the existing dormer window at number 23 probably actually views into the rear garden of number 25, which we saw on today's site visit. Although I'm fully cognisant of the point Councillor Lundy made that, you know, just because something was built under previous standards, it doesn't make it right for this standard. I was just wondering if there was any particular view in terms of whether overlooking a front garden would be considered an infringement of privacy, as compared to overlooking someone else's bedroom window or something. You see what I mean?
The case officer makes the point that in this particular instance, the particular nature of that front garden is different from other front gardens in the street, in that it is far more enclosed, private and set back from the road. And one of that feeds into their reason for refusal, that it is the unique nature of that front garden which creates the situation of overlooking, if that helps clarify the issue of front gardens and privacy.
It certainly is a good clarification, and you recall on the site visit, it is a secluded garden. It's not actually one that is visible from the front street like many of the other properties. So I think that is an important consideration for members. Councillor Edlin.
I think we have to take cognizance of the fact that half the garden space is taken up by this corrugated roof building, and also the position of the other dormer and the adjacent house that we're talking about. It's very high up, and we didn't actually go in there and look down ourselves. We couldn't go up on the roof and look down to see what would be seen. So how much would actually be seen at any one moment is questionable. I would just say that. I don't feel that the privacy issue really has merit in our consideration today because of that.
I mean, I would further say to that I do not, Provost Montague wishes to speak, that there is apparently some sort of, it's either a kind of garden room or summer house or garden shed, which is in the front garden of that property. So it would indicate, irrespective of the garage structure, that it is a space which is used by the household for outdoor recreation. Provost Montague, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. So much has been said about there being some kind of structure within a garden, but that's not the only view I would suggest from a window. And also things like that can be taken away. So it's not a permanent feature, could be taken away. So again, I would come back to the officer's professional judgment, given the constrictions of the different laws, regulations and policies, that it would give rise to significant additional overlooking given its orientation and proximity. So I'll stand by that again. Thanks.
Okay, that's super. I'd like to ask elected members if anyone would like to contribute anything to the debate which hasn't been said already, or we're quite happy to proceed to a vote. Okay, nobody else wishes to speak, in which case, Provost Montague, I presume you're moving to uphold?
I think it was Councillor Lundy was moving and I was happy to second.
Okay.
Is that the case?
You're on mute, Councillor Lundy.
Yeah, I'm happy to move to uphold the planner's decision.
Okay, and
seconded.
Provost Montague is seconding. And Councillor Edlin, are you otherwise minded, or?
I move to reject.
Okay. I've been considering this case, and actually, going around the site visit, you kind of form a preliminary view on something. But actually, what Mr. Brand has said to the body today has actually kind of changed my mind on what my original thinking was in terms of the overlooking of the front garden, and that the formation of this front garden is different by its nature. So that's the purpose of having the discussion, I guess, is so that we change our mind and come to a conclusion. So on that basis, I'd be voting for the motion to uphold. So we have a decision.
Yes, so as Councillor Edlin's motion has no seconder, it has no substance. Could I ask Councillor Edlin, do you wish your dissent to be recorded in the minute?
Could you please withdraw my motion?
Okay, no problem. So therefore, the decision of the local review body unanimously, therefore, is to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and reject planning permission in this case.
Okay, that's great, thank you. In which case we are on to the final case for this afternoon's meeting, which is review 2023/07, the erection of a dwelling house at Hazelden Mains Farm, 23 Hazelden Road in Newton Mearns. Can I invite Mr. Brand to outline this case, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this proposal is in Ward 5, Newton Mearns South and Eaglesham. There were no objections or representations. I'll now summarise the decision by the planning case officer. Planning permission in principle was refused in January 2022 for demolition of the stable block, removal of the paddock and construction of a house for reasons that it was contrary to policy D3 and D3.3 of the LDP in absence of site-specific justification. This proposal is a new proposal which once again seeks consent for a house, but this time retains the stable block and paddock and puts forward a justification for the house as being the applicant's wish to downsize from the existing farmhouse to the new house and stay in the area in order to look after their horses. The application is in principle, but the submission proposes a single-storey dwelling in the northwest portion of the site. The planning officer assessed against NPF 4 Policy 8, which states that development in the green belt will only be supported if, for the purposes of agriculture, forestry, key workers in primary industry, horticulture, outdoor recreation, tourism, and intensification of established use, or one-for-one replacement of an existing home. In addition, Policy 8 requires the provision of reasons as to why a greenbelt location is essential. The proposal was also assessed against LDP2 Policy D3, which limits greenbelt development to what is required for a rural location. Appropriate development supported in principles are forestry, agriculture, equestrian uses, tourism, and farm diversification. In addition, Policy D3.3 was used to assess the application. This relates to new building in the green belt, which is only permitted where it is demonstrated that there is no available existing house, and for workers engaged in uses outlined in Policy D3, that there is an operational requirement for 24 hours supervision, and this requires to be in the form of a new building. The planning officer's report states that no justification for a new dwelling in terms of an existing rural business was submitted. The planning officer considered if mitigating circumstances applied and refers to the applicant's planning supporting statement. The statement indicates the applicants wish to downsize locally and in the vicinity of their horses. In the planning officer's view, the applicant's personal preferences do not outweigh the policies of LDP2. The planning officer therefore refused because the application was contrary to NPF Policy 8, in that the applicant does not demonstrate that the building is necessary for any of the purposes set out in the policy and that no other dwelling is available. The application was also refused on grounds it was contrary to Policy D3 and D.33 of LDP2 in the absence of an appropriate site-specific justification which demonstrates that a dwelling is required at this location. I now summarise the reasons given by the applicant in support of their appeal. The revised application has a material difference from the 2022 application in that the paddock and stables are retained and incorporated into the curtilage of the proposed dwelling. The new dwelling is required in this location as the family operate existing stables and the existing house is too large and no longer serves the family's needs. The new dwelling allows the family to continue to live in the local area. This is in keeping with NPF 4's overarching principle of local living and rural revitalisation. The application does comply with Policy D3, in which, because the D3 supports principle of development where it is for agriculture, forestry, equestrian, and leisure and tourism uses. The appellant's case clearly states that the development supports an existing equestrian use. The house is necessary for 24-hour security of the stables. Downsizing to a smaller dwelling supports the continuation of a rural activity which is in accordance with Policy 3. NPF 4 allows a new dwelling for a key worker in a primary industry where the worker is essential to the operation. Horses require 24-hour monitoring and support, and accommodation is required in close proximity to the stables. In relation to LDP 2 Policy 3, the applicant notes the equestrian development is that equestrian development is acceptable in principle and states that the proposed dwelling is related to established equestrian use. The policy does not distinguish between new buildings and existing buildings, but refers to development being acceptable. The policies are worded to allow for personal situations as families change. The alternative is for the paddock and stables to be closed, leaving a large dwelling house and outbuildings which do not serve any rural purpose, contrary to the policies of MPF 4 supporting rural communities. The applicant makes a number of points in relation to the supplementary planning guidance rural development adopted in 2015. This guidance is no longer statutory, but it does retain status as guidance. The applicant reiterates that the supplementary guidance supports the application because the dwelling is necessary in this location to allow stable and paddock to continue to function. The guidance supports the need for balance between greenbelt protection and appropriate development. The siting and design of the proposed dwelling were considered satisfactory by the planning officer during the assessment. The building will sit in the landscape hidden by the landform and is consistent with the farming landscape. Finally, NPF 4 supports rural diversification and well-being of residents. Health and well-being of residents is a prominent government policy, and the new dwelling would allow for home working while in proximity to the stables. There will be no conditions attached if the application were to be upheld, if the appeal were to be upheld, because this is a planning in principle. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's super. Thank you, Mark. Anyway, I'd like to kick off the discussion. Well, and that, Provost Montague.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we visited the site and we have read the documents, and nowhere within that causes me to feel that the building of an additional new dwelling at that location is valid or should be supported. And also, I don't see any justification for site-specific additional dwelling either. And this is, to me, what this is. It's an additional dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Also, I was unclear if anyone was going to speak there or not. I was actually going to set out my kind of thoughts as well. The thing that struck me was policy D 3.3 clearly states that there has to be some sort of agricultural business going on to justify new build housing within Greenbelt. And the thing which struck me when we arrived for the site visit is, by the nature of the road, the lack of signage outside, it's not apparent there is any kind of business or commercial activity going on within that location. One of the questions I'd like to ask, I don't know if Mr. Brand's in a position to answer it just now, is that my understanding is if a premise is used for purely residential purposes, it pays council tax. If it's used for any non-domestic purpose, it would be registered for non-domestic rates, which one would expect a business to be. Is there any non-domestic rate activity structures within this location?
Chair, I don't know the answer to that. The only response I would give is that in the planning case officer's report of handling, they state that there wasn't sufficient justification, in their view, supplied to support the application and to meet the requirements of policy D 3.3.
Thank you. I suppose where I'm coming from here, and I'm bringing Councillor Redland, is that there does appear to be equestrian activity in that area. We pass someone riding a horse on the way into the site visit, and there are clearly stables there. But what is not clear is whether that is recreational, private equestrian activities or commercial equestrian activities. Councillor Redland, I'd like to bring in.
I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Brandt relating to the proposed erection of a property there, a dwelling house. And is there any indication that such a dwelling house, because this is where I got confused from what you said this morning to what you said this afternoon, will that dwelling house house workers in the adjacent stables? My understanding is it will just be the same people who lived in the house slightly further up from it, and they would be, the words used were downsizing. So I just want to be quite clear that in our consideration of this, there is no proposal to bring in new workers staying in that house as opposed to the original workers. So in other words, it's not being a new house built specifically to service the business, the agricultural business as a stables is considered.
In reply to that, the appellant's planning statement specifically states the new dwelling would be for the residents of the existing dwelling to downsize. There is no...
That answers my question, thank you. I just, when you mentioned your previous statement created some confusion in my mind, I appreciate your clarification.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lundy.
Yeah, sort of just going on from that point, I think what's important in the policy D3 is that it states that it's strictly controlled and limited to that which is required. And I think it's quite clear from all elected members' contributions that there is an existing property there, so there is no requirement to build a new property. It's just the residents' choice. They are wanting to downsize, but there's no requirement there for any new property to be built because they're there and they're adjacent to the existing stables already. So, yeah, that's my view. Okay.
So we've had quite a fulsome discussion around, whether there is a relevant business activity there or not, whether actually new build or alteration to existing structures may be more appropriate in a downsizing situation. Does anyone have anything further they'd like to contribute to the debate? Okay, I think we should move to a vote in that case. If anyone would like to propose.
I propose that we uphold the planning officer's decision to refuse.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Lundy. I'm minded to support that also, and Councillor Edlin?
Minded to support.
Okay, so that's a unanimous decision to uphold the planning officer's decision. Clerk, is there any further business to be transacted?
No further business, Chair, but just to clarify that the local review body in that case has unanimously moved and voted to uphold the appointed officer's decision and refuse planning permission in that case.
That's great, thank you very much. And that concludes this afternoon's meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Right.
Thanks to the Chair.